So one of the first things that we can do as a starting point to a more inclusive education system and a more inclusive environment is looking at the language that we use. So words that we use against specific race groups, against specific against a gender, against a person can be very, very hurtful, but also put them in a box. So when you say something about a specific person, you think of them in that way, and others think about them in that way as well. So as I say here, language has power and it does affect the way we act. If we think of people in a certain way, it does affect the way we act. So for us, what our goal should be and what the goal of inclusive education is that every person feels included, everyone feels as their value, that they are respected and that they belong. So we need to think about the language that we use. So I'm going to go through some of this, but not everything. But you need to read the document that has been uploaded to the Moodle platform called Respectful Language. It's not the only document on the topic, and there's a lot more work that is and has been done in this regard, but it's up to you to read up on it, understand it, and internalize it because it's an important aspect of your teaching and learning process. So, when we talk about people and we give them a label, the label carries not only a specific type of thinking of that person, but it also carries a host of other characteristics that will associate with that person just because the label indicates that that person fits into a specific box. Okay, so what do I mean by this? So, for example, if we talk about people with disabilities, it puts the person first. So, it's a person who experiences or has a disability. When we talk about the handicapped or the disabled, in your mind, the way our communities and our environments have been set up, we think of someone who isn't able to do things for themselves. We think about someone who needs a lot of help, who is unable to do anything that really is going to be constructive. So we need to strike this type of thinking from our psyche, from our language, from the way we talk and think about people. Always put the person first. I want to show you what I mean. This says person with disability. So I personally don't really like the word disability. I talk about differently abled because we are all abled in a different way, irrespective of what you can and can't do according to a specific standard. We all have strengths, we all have weaknesses, we all have abilities that are different to the next person. So I'd like to use Stephen Hawking as an example. He is a man that at the age of 22 was given a diagnosis by doctors. Doctors said you have 2 years to live because you have this disease. It's going to break down your body and your body won't be able to bear it, and you'll then pass on. And 2 years is the max we're giving you. Stephen Hawking died at the age of 76. He's heralded as a genius of our time. He has contributed so much to the field of science. He's done we had written more than 200 papers, given talks all over the world, experienced things that many of us have not experienced. But he was a man in a wheelchair. When you look at him, some people will see a wheelchair bound man and some will see a genius. It depends on the way in which you look at the world. What we need to understand is that our children, irrespective of what they come to us with, what challenges they come to us with, they all have abilities. They are able to do something. That is why we can talk about differently abled people as opposed to disabled, but because that has a more negative connotation. So it depends on our mindset and the way in which we want to think about others and the way in which we want to think about our students, and whether we are able to give them that motivation and positivity, that we believe in them, that we know that there is something that they can do, and we help them find that thing that they are good at. So I would like you to go to this respectful language document as well as looking at the list here. It has some of the terms that are negative terms that are used within our communities. Go through these. Look at the way in which you express yourself. What language do you use? It's okay if right now you are more on the negative terms side, but remember, this is no excuse. once you understand or once you learn something or know about something and the way to fix others, it is then your responsibility not only to change the way you do things and what you say, but it's now also your responsibility to help educate others so that they too can improve the way they talk about others and the way they express themselves in relation to others as well. So we can talk a little bit about where it all started. I want you to please refer to the journal article, The Implementation of Inclusive Education in South Africa After 10 Years of Democracy by Petra Engelbrecht, as well as the excerpt from the Addressing Barriers to Learners textbook. Those are important foundational documents for you to read to help you understand where inclusive education starts, because I'm only giving you a very brief overview within this PowerPoint presentation within this video. So the first special school started in the UK in about the 1850s, but these schools were only really to accommodate children with hearing or visual impairments. Thereafter, by the 19th century, there was a big movement to special school sector, and this continued into the 20th century, and we're still seeing this movement today. In the 1960s, there was a human rights movement internationally as well as starting in South Africa. For this, but there was it was a greater kind of movement within the 1960s. And people were beginning to change their views on disabilities within societies. So no longer were they seen as non-members of society, but they were starting to be included within societies. But there was very little research on special schools, on people that are differently abled. Because of apartheid and the effects of apartheid, segregation was institutionalized to such a degree that it impacted education. So not only was it on a political level, not only was it on a social level, but obviously people were separated according to their language at the time. Children were taught in different languages depending on how they were being discriminated against and how they were being oppressed. So children who were Afrikaans third language were taught in a language that they had very little grasp and skill in. And this obviously affected the way in which they were able to learn. And what that causes is internalizing differences, internalizing separation, and more or less approach. So you are less than me because you are other and you are different, and I am more than you because I'm in a different group. So this greatly affects the way in which people view each other and themselves. So the shortcomings of this system, besides the obvious ones, was that it was very deficit orientated. So it looked at what was missing rather than the strengths. It wasn't an asset-based approach, it was a deficit approach. Sorry, a deficit orientated approach. What is wrong? What is missing? It doesn't look at the environmental factors, it looks at the child as a problem. And it limits the participation rate, it limits who is able to get involved, who is able to work together, it limits collaboration generally. And this causes a host of problems. You develop psychological problems, social problems, and generally challenges within the community and within creating citizenship within the communities. And of course, this is going to breed discrimination, negative attitudes towards each other. The other is always going to be bad and less than you. It also costs a lot, because it costs a lot to have different schools for different people and different schools for different learning abilities. So it does have a great cost implication as well. And most of all, it violates basic human rights. We cannot say today that this has been completely overhauled and completely changed. Our policy documents have changed. The way in which we approach education has changed, but some people's mindsets have not changed. That there are great challenges that still exist. Segregation and inequality are deeply entrenched, and they still are bred in our communities in various ways within our family settings. Some of us see this in our families or in our peer groups, but it is something that we're starting to move away towards and moving away from, and we need to be part of this change and part of making this difference in our communities. So this unit is really about introducing you to inclusive education. There's going to be a lot of journal articles that you're going to be reading, and it's very tough to read these journal articles because they can be very word heavy and very confusing. So you're going to have to spend a lot of time going through them, writing summaries for yourself. Besides the journal articles, there are various policy documents that are going to be guiding us in this process, and they are quite a lot to get through. So I'm going to ask you to please start now. Try to go through at least some of the policy documents at this point before we get to that unit, because by the time we get to that unit, you may not have time to go through all of this. So these are some of the policy documents that are guiding us. Some are international, and some are some are South African policy documents and specific to our context. But they really are going to improve your performance not only in this module but also your understanding of education as a whole. So I would really advise you to start on this as soon as possible. The CS process and the policy is something we're going to be focusing on and get a lot of presentations and talks on, but we'll focus on that later in the unit. And to address this at this point at Unit 1 in this course, you may have heard this about inclusive education. There are misconceptions. And the misconceptions I'm going to go through them one by one. We need separate schools for students according to their abilities. We do not need special schools, but we do need teachers that are trained to understand how we can accommodate learners, because it's very difficult for teachers as well. But if they are given the skills, help to develop tools to accommodate all learners, it is possible, and it's not much extra work if it's already part of what you do and what you know how to do. You don't have to have specialized training. You do, though, need to include these types of principles within your school spaces and within the general training programs. It's not just for rich people. It won't take up too much time. It is our job, and inclusion does not negatively impact students, rather quite the opposite. It positively impacts our students because they become people who accept others for who they are, accommodate others, and if kids will accept things if it's just part of the environment. If they are in a school where everybody has different abilities but everyone is accepted, they will accept that as the norm. And that is how our societies will change and how we will be able to move towards a community, society, and country that allows everyone to feel as if they are part of something and that they're important and they belong. These are some of the benefits of inclusion. It does not just benefit the learner in the classroom, but it also benefits the teacher, the communities, the families which will feel overwhelmed maybe by the way in which the communities or the environments and societies are treating their child. When we include the children, we include people with differences and different abilities, it does greatly benefit families because they will feel less overwhelmed, they'll feel less different, they'll feel as if they are still part of communities rather than pushed outside because they have a child with a child with a challenge. But the environment now accepts the child and accommodates for the child as well. I'm excited to share this journey of inclusive education with you because I believe in it deeply, and I know that many of you all buy into this type of thinking as well. Every child can learn. It seems challenging, but remember what they're experiencing in their environments impacts the way in which the child presents within your classroom space. So we need to re-examine the classroom environment and curriculum to accommodate every single child. It's a learning process for all of us, but one with which we should grab with both hands and be excited about. And remember, not every child in your classroom is going to perform exactly the same way. Just because they're all in grade 3 doesn't mean that they can meet what the curriculum expects them to meet, but they can learn and they can reach their potential if they are given the opportunity to. And I love the saying, it says, if I can't learn the way in which you teach me, then teach me in the way that I can learn. So we must change the way that we look at children. Don't expect to give one lesson and every child needs to grasp it, but rather how do we accommodate every single child? So this brings us to the end of our Unit 1 video, which is your Introduction to Inclusive Education 1. Please read the various journal articles that I have uploaded, the various guides and the various resources. They are going to help you not only set the foundation for this course, but of course they're going to help you with your assessments. And every single piece that has been uploaded will be referred to or will be quote unquote tested within the assessments for this module. So good luck, and I hope you enjoy the journey.